You're listening to Big World Network.
Accidental Passion, Episode 1, Almost a Dream, read by Megan Hedin. Warning: although there is no material subject matter within that couldn't be found in any general bookstore with no age constraint, this series is rated 18 and contains adult situations and content. It is intended for mature audiences only and should not be read if you are uncomfortable with graphic sexual intimacy. She wasn't going to kid herself. She knew the electric passion and overwhelming desire to be with him at every moment wasn't going to last forever. At 35 years old, Kim also knew that she wasn't going to let that thought ruin the evening. Not after all the planning and anticipation. And the deception. That was the part she had trouble with. Climbing out of the rental car she had picked up at the airport, Kim felt the recurring pang of guilt. She mentally berated herself as she crossed the street to the beach condo Rick had rented for their weekend. Why should she feel guilty? She had given up the last 11 years of her life raising 2 children while putting aside her own dreams, supporting Kevin through his education and beginning career as a dentist. In the past, she had always felt special and attractive to Kevin, but in recent years he barely noticed her. She didn't care anymore, she told herself, because she knew his darkest secret, and what she was doing paled in comparison. She had never confronted Kevin about it. In fact, he had no idea she knew. If she hadn't met Rick, she would have come apart when she discovered Kevin's secret, quite by accident. But even then she knew the direction things were going with Rick, and that alone made her discovery much easier to deal with. Kim forced all of these thoughts out of her mind, wanting only to focus on this evening. She wanted to savor it, to burn every moment into her brain, every sensation and electrifying touch, every feeling. Finding the right section of condos, just as Rick had described them, she made her way between 2 of the units, taking in a deep breath of the night air. It was magical to her, the scent of the ocean, and it made her feel alive. Living in Detroit, it had been years since she had taken in the smell of salt air. Kevin could never spend the time away from his practice for vacations, preventing her from enjoying the ocean which she loved so much. Already, Kim could hear the surf as she passed several tropical plants and flowers, typical of Key West landscaping. As the sound of the surge grew stronger, so did her excitement and anticipation. She was almost afraid the moment would be snatched from her, and it was at that moment she saw it. The deep blue water with shimmering light, the night sky, and the mostly full moon. It was so overwhelming and beautiful. It almost felt like a dream. Reaching the sand, Kim stopped and removed her shoes and carried them with her as she continued toward the dark figure on the beach. He was right where he had said he would be, reclining in a beach chair. When he saw her, he stood up in the darkness and waited for her to reach him. "You made it," Rick called. She said nothing until finally reaching him, putting her arms around his waist over his t-shirt. Pulling him tight to her, she whispered in his ear, "I've missed you." He cupped her cheeks in his large hands and kissed her. It was a light kiss, but sensual, and she felt she could feel every emotion he felt as their lips touched. Before parting, she shuddered as he gently pulled on her lower lip with his. She ran her hands down his sides to his waist, standing back enough to take in his appearance. She laughed out loud as he noticed he was already aroused, it being very apparent in his Bermuda shorts, even in the moonlight reflecting off the ocean. She always took it as a compliment with him. It made her feel sexy and exciting. It had been many years since Kevin had shown that kind of excitement just from a simple kiss. "What?" he asked defensively. "Nothing. It's just that you always make me feel so desirable," she said, directing her eyes down to his shorts. "It's just my cell phone," he kidded, "but you are terribly desirable." He pulled her close again to kiss her. This time she felt him, pressed against her, sending a wave of desire throughout her body. Finally breaking apart, Rick took her hand and pulled her toward the shore, always so outwardly confident in his actions. They walked in the smooth, wet sand, leaving footprints behind until the next wave smoothed it over again. The sand felt amazing between her toes, as did the foaming water as it flowed just over the tops of their feet with each wave. The coldness of the water on her feet was a relief from the hot, humid evening and day of travel. As they walked, she was once again reminded of his large stature. Rick wasn't overweight at all, but towered above her and had broad shoulders, which his dark hair never came close to reaching. They talked and laughed, sharing details of their flights and travel that day. There wasn't much to say, though, with the countless hours they had spent on the phone and thoughts and emotions they shared in emails. They mostly just enjoyed the freedom of being together, sharing in the beauty and warmth of the evening, both figuratively and literally. Eventually, they were about a half-mile down the beach from the back of the condos where they started. Rick pulled Kim to a stop, kissed her, and took off his shirt. "Let's swim," he said, taking off for the water and diving right into a wave. When he was waist-high in the water, he called back to her to come in. "I don't have a suit on," she yelled back, laughing. "So? It's dark out. No one's around." What was it about him that made her take risks, she wondered as she very quickly pulled her blouse over her head along with her bra, not even bothering to undo it, and slipped out of her skirt and panties. She threw them in a pile and ran out into the water under the moonlight as he watched her. They swam and played like teenagers, laughing and giggling. Rick was a good bit older than her at 41, but he was in fantastic shape. He had the energy of someone half his age, Kim thought, as he grabbed her and threw her in the water. The sensation of their innocent touching and romping, along with the water on her naked body, made her feel so alive, so sensual, and even relieved. She wondered why she felt relieved, and then she realized. What he gave her was something she so desperately needed, a distraction from the frustrations of her life. It was all gone, all behind her when she was with him. He gave her an escape. That was why she felt relief, she thought, as she watched him swim out to a sandbar. Kim followed suit, swimming out to him. They were able to stand with the water only reaching high enough to cover her breasts and just above his lower chest, despite their distance from shore. It was beautiful, with the moonlight shimmering all around them on the water. He turned her toward him and looked down at her face. She knew she really was quite beautiful, with short blonde hair and a slender figure. She worked hard to keep her looks after having her children, always hoping Kevin would take a new interest in her. But now she could see from Rick's gazing look that he appreciated her beauty. Again they kissed, this time a deeper, more passionate kiss. She let Rick lead, take charge and guide them. It was easier this way, to just let herself flow with the moment, not allowing herself to question anything, to just live in the moment. She felt the desire build in her as his hands moved from her neck to her shoulders, where he followed by sliding his large hands down over her breast to the sides of her belly, and further, finally, to her hips. Kim felt one hand slide from her hip to the inside of her leg and back up again, taking her breath while they kissed. She always liked the way Rick took the long way around when it came to her body, never just reaching for what he desired, but instead leaving her with the feeling that her entire body was so exceptionally desirable to him. It had been so long since she had felt anything like this. She wasn't even sure she had ever felt like this before Rick. There was just something so special about the physical and emotional connection they shared. Well, that she shared. She often secretly wondered if it was just physical with him, but then she would brush off the thought as just her own insecurities. Wanting to give back some of the sensations he was giving her, Kim's hands found their way down his chest, which was hairless except for a few strands just around his nipples. Reaching his hips, she tugged on his shorts, pulling them down just enough to release him. She kissed him deeply back, hearing him moan ever so slightly as she wrapped her hands around him. Once again she whispered to him, "I've missed you." "I've missed you too," he replied, looking down into her eyes as her hands caressed him. The moment really was perfect. Kim didn't want it to ever end. Again, for the second time this evening, she felt like she was in a dream. It was all too perfect. But she knew that the relationship, their magic, wouldn't last forever and would surely come at a price. She just didn't have any idea what that price was going to be.
This has been a presentation of Big World Network. Visit us on bigworldnetwork.com for more free weekly series, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Big World Network.